Hey guys, today I'm going to do a little video on what it takes to be a drum teacher, like what qualifications you should have and when do you think you should start charging money to teach people. Of course, anybody can teach their friends, free country, anybody can make YouTube videos, not the YouTube police, but if you're going to be charging money and trying to have a business of being a drum teacher, it's useful and helpful if you are qualified, right? So again, there's no law, there's no rule, I'm not the drum police, but these are some things that should help you decide, should I be charging money for this or should I get a little bit more experience before I attempt to make my living as a drum teacher. I primarily make most of my money as a drum teacher. There's no grading scale. But I've definitely seen some people who are worse, who probably shouldn't be teaching or at least not charging money to people for it. And obviously there's master teachers who are better than I am. But here's a few things I think will help. Thing one, you should be better than the people you're teaching. Should go without saying, but I've seen some people who could barely play, who are trying to teach like beginners, and they were just slightly ahead of the beginner all the time. And that's not a good way to be. You need to look at your students with the perspective of being several rungs in the ladder above them. So if there's a bunch of things you run into that you can't do, that your students are asking you to do, they need to probably go to another teacher. And if that happens to you all the time because you're not that good, you're not going to make any money at it, and it's not going to be quite right for you to be teaching people if you don't really know the answer to a lot of their questions. Another thing I think is important is you have to be able to read music. You have to be able to teach people to read music, and I think you should know and be able to teach the basic, at least 26 rudiments. A lot of people are not into reading in rudiments these days. A lot of people want to play by ear. But if you're trying to be a real drum teacher, charging money to kids, a lot of those kids are in school. Most of your students are not going to be adults or teens. They're going to be younger kids. And they're going to need to work on parts for school band, and that requires reading and it requires rudiments. You're going to get kids who want to be on drumline. You're going to get adults and older teens even, college kids, who actually understand that learning the fundamentals is important, and you don't want to be dissuading people, oh, you don't want to learn to read, there's no point in that. If they want to do it, you should be able to teach them. You should also be able to teach by ear, and that's important too. But if you can't do those fundamental basic, elementary school, middle school things, you're going to lose a lot of business and you're not going to be very effective. The next thing I'm going to say is a little bit more contentious. I think you probably ought to have a degree in music, at least like an associate's degree, have taken some college courses. Now, not everyone can afford that, not everyone's done that. A lot of pro players haven't done that, and you wouldn't say that an elite level player couldn't teach. So on the other hand, if you haven't gotten any formal education in music, you should probably have taken lessons from someone who was really, really good for an extended amount of time, like a couple of years at least. If you haven't seen percussion pedagogy in the field, how are you going to do it yourself? If you're just trying to wing it based off of completely being self-taught, your students are going to be funky, right? So nothing against anyone who is self-taught, but if you haven't seen the accepted methods and strategies for taking students from one level to another, then you probably aren't going to give the student the best experience they could have. Obviously, like if you're a master player, the drum god of the world, then you probably have enough experience to make up for that. But if you're just like a regular person and you haven't taken a ton of lessons from a really good qualified teacher, and or maybe some of each, taken some college courses or gotten a degree in music, you're not going to have the background and the pedagogical skills that you require to really teach someone effectively. It's one or the other or both, but none is kind of not a good place to start. Next thing that would be good for you to have is industry experience, meaning that you've played shows with live bands on stage. Original bands, cover bands, maybe different genres of music, classical music, popular music, jazz, what have you, because you're going to have students who want to perform. That's sort of the point of playing the drums for a lot of people, is to get in a band and at least jam with people. And if you're not used to playing shows and the whole industry, the booking and the loading in and all the rigmarole that goes with playing shows, then you're going to be in a position where you're not able to offer your students help in that area. You're not going to know what it's really like, applying exercises to actual performance. Okay, the last thing I'm going to throw out there is you have to have a plan. So this is the easiest one. You just got to think of something. But like when a beginner level 0 comes through your door, you need to instantly say, here's what we're going to learn today, here's what we're going to learn next week, and for the next several years almost, anywhere from months to years, depending on how fast people learn. You should have, okay, this is what we do this week, this is what we do this week. And every student's going to be different. You're going to have to be flexible, but if you have at least a baseline plan of what's going to happen to get them from nothing to something, then you're going to be able to present yourself as informed and as prepared. So like I have a fairly good plan in order over the past like 9 years that I've been teaching of what I teach to beginners, what I teach to people who can play a little bit. Obviously the better the student gets, the more individualized the lessons become. Now lastly, I'm going to leave you with the story of the worst drum teacher I've ever encountered. Now I'll say I never met the guy. I assume he's a nice guy. We'll call him Joe. Doesn't really matter what his name was. He taught at a place before me. Everyone liked him, and then he left, got another job, moved away, whatever happened. Okay, so I inherited all of his students. Now he had probably 20, 25 students, and most of them had been playing for a year or 2 years, or some up to even 3 years, with this same teacher, only teacher most of them had ever had. Most of them could not hold the sticks correctly. Most of them could not play like an AC/DC type 4/4 rock beat. Most of them could not play any rudiments. Most of them could not read any music whatsoever. So, you know, all the fundamental things you'd think that you would learn within the first few weeks or months of being a drummer, not one of these kids had it. Maybe there was one kid who was on the cusp of having them, and that's because he was in school band or whatever. But the rest of them completely devoid of any actual ability. So what I gather from these kids is that what they were doing was the teacher would just put on a backing track and play it. The teacher would play the real drum part to the song, and the kids would do whatever they wanted. There was no instruction. It was just like a play-along session. I think he was hoping that they would just see what he was doing and copy, but he never checked. He never gave them tips. He never adjusted or corrected anything. So when I came in, like 20 out of these 25 kids quit within the first 2 weeks because I would play the backing track, I would play the stuff, and I would then turn to them and say, okay, you do it without me. And that just blew their minds. I would show it to them written down, reading, blew their minds. I would adjust their grip or their motion in some way to make it easier, blew their minds. Most of them wanted to just bash incoherently for 30 minutes and then leave having gained absolutely nothing out of the lesson. And they'd been prepared for that by years of exactly that happening. So as long as you're not that guy, you're already ahead. This is absolutely the worst thing I've ever encountered. Made me look like an idiot because they'd been basically groomed for drum lessons being babysitting and not an educational experience. I didn't know that going in, or maybe I wouldn't have done it, or maybe I would have approached it a different way. It's too late now, but that guy sucked, and you don't have to be that guy. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.